exchange of ideas, between presenters and the audience. And I encourage you again to use every opportunity this afternoon to connect with speakers and talk to them about their research. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Subai Gunasekaran, and this is Yingguo. And together, we are the co-chairs for the SMRA Early Career Committee, or the ECC. We wanted to thank you all so much for your enthusiastic participation in our ECC events over the past week. So we had the early Rising Stars session, and then we had the mentor-mentee collaborations, as well as the international collaborations talks yesterday. And today we're very excited for our upcoming fireside chat. But we just wanted to thank everyone for coming and joining us. And if there are any young trainees who are interested to get involved with the ECC, we would love to have you. It's a great group of international students, and we come together to plan this event, as well as other supporting methods with the SMRA. And it's a pretty low commitment. We meet once a month virtually, so it's not going to be overwhelming time-wise, but you get a lot of access to learning about how SMRA works. And with the upcoming conference in Chile, it'd be a great way to get involved for planning events for the future. So if you are interested, please email me or Yin, and we would love to have you. And then one final thank you for everyone who's participated and spoke during our ECC sessions this week. We really appreciate it, as well as the SMRA board for being so supportive for the ECC, as well as giving us so much precious time during the conference for these events. So thank you all so much, and we're excited for our upcoming fireside chat. So we'll give it to Giles. Thank you.
So this is a fireside chat. I think Hideki's just getting the matches ready to light the wood, no? So you'll have to sit over there. We need 3 seats. So I'm just going to sit down, and I'm going to chat to these eminent physicists as a radiologist, and find out how they got where they are today. Is that working? Yes. Okay. So we'll just get cozy. I don't think we've got a drink. Have we got a drink? Do we get a drink? No? No, maybe not. I'm going to start with Matthias first. I think he looks older and greyer. And I had a look at Matthias on Google Scholar, and he's got an H index that is double mine. I think his H index is 68, something like that. So he's done a lot of work that's been cited a lot of times. And as far as I can work out, the first publication to do with the heart for Matthias was in 1993, so that's 30 years ago. Can you believe that? That's why your hair's that colour now, isn't it? So what I'm interested in, though, is your first publication was about MRI and the heart and the heartbeat. Do you remember this? Do you remember the paper? So what I want to know is, how did you get into cardiac imaging? Because you've done cardiac imaging consistently throughout your career. Did you seek out that paper, or were you just in the right place at the right time? How did you get to do that?
Well, first of all, to the age index, it's like the calcium score. It correlates with age, right? So that only shows that I'm probably older than you are. But to your question, we were fortunate enough that at the ETH in Zurich, where I studied electrical engineering and where I always thought my career will be, I don't know, building better vacuum cleaners or something, right? As an electrical engineer, we had the Institute of Biomedical Engineering, and they just acquired a new MRI system, and I was fortunate enough to take the lectures of Professor Bösiger at the time, and I thought, I understand nothing what he's talking about, so therefore it's so darn interesting. So I went down to his lab, which was in the university hospital. I talked to the PhD students, and I just fell in love with this topic about which I didn't understand anything. And also they already collaborated with Otto Hess at the time, an eminent cardiologist who was interested in MRI of the heart. And so this created a vibrant atmosphere where translation was already in the DNA of that system. And so the rest is history. I don't know anything else to do than cardiovascular MRI.
So you don't know anything else to do. Do you do it all the time? Is it your hobby? You know, when you're not in the lab and you're at home, are you thinking about heartbeats and MRI and how to do it? Is that why it's your passion? It's now just integrated into your life. You can't do anything else.
I must probably admit my life is quite boring, yes. This is my passion. It has been my passion. It will always be my passion. Also from an engineering standpoint, it's so interesting to try to tackle the problems that are related to motion. That's why I was never attracted by brain imaging, for instance, because not much moves. Well, if you go to a smaller scale, you discover it does, but not to the extent as the heart does.
Okay, the same thing for Sasha. So your first publication was not about cardiac and was not about motion or blood vessels or anything. So how did you get into blood vessels? You're into the very, very small blood vessels, the tiny little ones, aren't you, really?
Yes, you tried to explain to me that I should start coming to this meeting, even though I only look at capillaries. Nobody's ever seen a capillary using MRI, not even using a 9.4 Tesla. But my first paper wasn't an MRI, but I always wanted to do MRI. I wanted to do MRI since I first read about it when I was about 18. But unlike you, I was planning to image brains exclusively. And on my travels, I scanned almost every organ of the body more than the brain. So it was slightly circuitous path to cardiac, but I agree with Matthias that cardiac has an added attraction of being so difficult to image. It has so many, poses so many challenges to engineers and mathematicians and physicists and radiologists, and very often we find if we can acquire good image in the heart, we can then translate it to any part of the body, and get fantastic imaging results, because the bar is so high when we're trying to image hearts.
And do you like Matthias when you're home from work? Are you dreaming about blood vessels and perfusion? Is it your passion and your hobby the same way?
I'm dreaming about many different things, but I hardly ever sleep, so I dream about cardiac MRI a lot, in addition to other things.
So, Matthias, you were on stage here yesterday talking about collaborations, international collaborations, but how do you recognize in somebody else that they've got the same kind of passion as you, the same drive to get, to overcome the challenges that you see? How do you think you find like-minded people?
I think it really over the years, and thanks to all these conferences I had the good fortune to be able to go to, you kind of get to know all these people. You know, so many of people who are in the room here became my friends over the years. It's just incredible. It's such a privilege to be exposed to this. Where does this ever happen? You know, that you work for 30 some years with the same people, you see them time and time again at the conferences, and of course, if you are so exposed to these people, you seek out those who are like-minded. You find out quickly who has the same passion for the same questions, because you hang around the same posters, right? When they were still real posters and not e-posters, which you don't find anymore. So you get in contact with these people at these conferences, and I think this is one of the things that stick. And again, I think it's very important to have these conferences in person and not virtually.
So I see you at these conferences, not just SMRA, but you know, ISMRM, etc. But at ISMRM, you're at the cardiac bits. But at SMRA, you're sitting in here watching all the brain stuff as well, aren't you? You're not just looking at the cardiac, and you're taking inspiration from other bits of the body, aren't you? That's the unique thing about this organisation, is that people see things that are going on in the brain, even though they're only interested in the legs, but they think, oh, I could apply that, yes?
Yeah, this is really fascinating. I just think about the talk about immersing the foot in hot water, right? And I'm thinking, well, you could also do it with cold water, and then you would probe the endothelial function with a cold pressure test, right? So there are all these ideas that immediately come to your mind just sitting in here and not looking at your email on your phone, but rather listening to a talk. And this is very, very enriching, as you say, because you get the whole breadth of angiography in one meeting, and not only the moving heart or mapping as you would do probably at the ISMRM.
Sasha, you anything to say on that?
I agree with Matthias. You know, I haven't been part of the community for as long as he had, but had the same impression and same result, you know, of cross-pollination, of listening to talks in a slightly different area that spark a train of thoughts that is very, very conducive to, you know, problem solving in another area. I actually, for ISMRM, I instruct my students to deliberately go to what they call wrong ballrooms, you know, just to expose themselves to different areas of MRI applications, because at that junction, you know, between disciplines and areas of application is where the most creative stuff emerges from.
So another thing I want to explore with you both is your how you interact with other disciplines, the word you use there, Sasha. How do you, as you know, someone, you're more backroom in terms of physics engineering, but yet you're very successful, Matthias particularly, in getting your ideas out there, and you're using them in patients, and you're showing how they can be used in patients. So you must have to build relationships with radiologists, cardiologists, but also technologists, or what we call in the UK radiographers. How do you go about doing that? Because that's fundamental. I mean, you can't do it without getting into patients, can you?
Yes, I think in my case this was not really an intellectual decision, but because when I did my PhD in Zurich, and with Otto Hess, the cardiologist I mentioned, who was just there and who called me at 1 o'clock in the morning, hey, I have a patient with aortic stenosis, I want this patient scanned. This created a dynamic, and I also would say I appreciated the value of that my stuff can be translated, can be used in a patient, and may be useful for that particular patient's treatment in the future. So that kind of was in the DNA of my PhD thesis out of fortuity. It was not a conscious decision to go about it that way. This then taught me to collaborate with clinicians and to try to bring my techniques from the bench to the bedside, as it were. And that's also what I'm trying to instill into my students, that it only matters if it can be applied in patients at the end of the day.
So one of the groups that is integral, that doesn't come to this meeting, is the technologists. When you're first implementing some of your new pulse sequences or whatever, how closely do you interact with the technologists, or do you go to the scanner yourself and you scan the patients? Because that's one of the stumbling blocks of getting our technologies actually adopted, is making them easy enough for the technologists to use.
Well, actually, they are not that enthusiastic about it being as easy as possible. There is a little bit of a barrier because, of course, there is a risk that all their skills and of course for technologists who do cardiovascular MR, they need very particular skills. They are very unique. And you're right, we often forget the technologists. The technologists don't come to these meetings because it's also a financial question, can they even go? But they are at the front line, and if we don't have them on board, we are not successful at all. So they're really instrumental. But I would say in my lab, my PhD students who I see sitting there, they have a very good relationship with the technologists, and they call them if there is a new feromoxetol patient, then Ludovica has to run down the alley and get the data off the scanner, and they inform her and vice versa. So it's really a give and take. And what we are also trying to do in return is invite them to our meetings, the local meetings we are holding. I invite them to my annual retreat I'm holding, and I try to get them on the papers also so that they get recognition in that way. And they really add a lot of knowledge how to do things, which we simply don't because we are not exposed to the same extent to patient scanning.
So also thinking about our small society, though we've got a very good attendance this year, but it's not a big society. But we do have challenges in what we were talking about yesterday in terms of international collaboration, multi-center trials. With your experience of not only having been a past president of SMRA, but also SCMR, how do you think the society could take forward actual multi-center trials of some of these things to disseminate them better?
This is a very difficult question. I personally was involved in 2 multi-center trials. One was the coronary MR trial from Warren Manning back in the days, and I think it was published in 1999 or 2000. And the other one was a late enhancement multi-center trial where patient data were collected, but it never saw the light of day, this publication, unfortunately. And I think it's so hard to initiate a multi-center trial and also to find the funding for it. That is not trivial at all. I don't think the NIH or any other funding agency is really keen of funding multi-center trials. So there need to be other mechanisms in order to get things like that off the ground. And I'm thinking here about the SCMR has this registry for the SPINS trial, the perfusion data. And if something like that could be established to have access to data for using all these smart AI algorithms to use on this data, maybe that's something the society could do. And I'm not exactly sure how easy it would be to initiate multi-center trials, to be honest.
I'm just thinking that in the world of cardiac MR, though, there have been many multi-center trials, such as CMARC, which is now into CMARC 3, for example. And yet we don't seem to be able to do that with trials in the legs or trials of carotids or anything. Why is it that cardiology has been more successful? Maybe Sasha has some ideas as to why cardiology has been more successful in getting these technologies actually proven through multi-center trials, which is what gets us into guidelines after all. And without guidelines, we don't get used.
That's very true. I mean, with cardiac, again, the potential for it is sky high, potential diagnostically, for impactful contribution to diagnosis and management. But uptake is pitifully low, so there was this tension between very low uptake. That's below 2%. This 2% figure that I heard the other day, I've been hearing about it for a very long time now, about 15 years. So there was this big gap that needed to be bridged between very low uptake and huge potential, and the only mechanism to do this is known to man currently is through clinical trials. But there are things that we can do within our community, especially the basic scientists and technologists and physicists, in the domain of demonstrating reproducibility of our techniques and avoiding phrases such as "at our hands." In our hands, we show that A is correlated to B. It must be in everybody's hands, otherwise it's of no use. It's not a material eligible for clinical trials. But clinical trials, in essence, just show you that your technique is robust enough that in anybody's hands, in 2 centers, 5 centers, 6 centers, you will get consistent results. That's all they are there for. To get us bigger numbers, to make sure that statistical significance is there, that we can trust our readings, but also to show that this is not an in-house, me, I can only do this and present these secret results using my secret technique. It's no good when it comes to rolling it out to the wider world and making it useful for our patients. So there's a plea again. Look at your reproducibility as something essential to promoting the value of what we do. It's not just a boring test that your supervisor is asking you to do. There's a huge inherent value in showing that what you can do today, you can repeat in a week's time, that you can pass on your methods to your colleagues in another country, and they will get the same reading as you.
I would like to add something to that, and I think also here we shouldn't forget the vendors. They play a crucial role, right, in rolling out, in disseminating the techniques some or many of us have developed. Without the vendors bringing it out there into the field, we are tinkering in our own basement, right, and that's it. And we can show reproducibility as much as we want. Doesn't matter, right?
That's very true, and the way the vendors disseminate these things is through their application specialists. And their application specialists are often technologists, aren't they? They're technologists who've moved from the clinical to go to work for industry, but their roots are in being radiographers, technologists. So it's again something that I think we, as a society, maybe need to concentrate more on, is getting technologists on board and showing them how to do things, as Sasha says, reproducibly. I'm interested, many people in the room don't know, but the Secretariat for the SMRA are also the Secretariat for the Mackay Society. And I was interested if you have any thoughts there. Matthias, you mentioned getting registries going. Maybe the Mackay Society would be interested in looking at our data. They're the people who most likely want to look at our data. Maybe we've got a synergistic approach there. If we could get together as a two societies to say how we put together a registry and how we actually have a data repository for that.
I think this is an outstanding idea. I myself, I'm in Lausanne. In Lausanne, this is a city where we have a medical university, we have a university hospital, we have a very well-known technical university, the EPFL, and it seems to be so difficult to bring these two worlds, medicine and engineering, together in the same city, even though there are only like 2 miles, 4 kilometers in between them. And why are we not capable of doing that, bringing engineering closer to medicine and vice versa? And I'm certain that the future challenges in healthcare will be solved in many, many aspects by engineering. If you think about the downward pressure of the economics on medicine, it needs smart engineering approaches. And if there is an attempt or a successful implementation of something you mentioned, like Mackay together with SMRA, I think that would be tremendously enriching if such an addition would come to fruition.
Jason?
I agree. Our data is the gold mine for anybody interested in AI. And rather than trying to do everything ourselves, there's a beauty and value in DIY approach to artificial intelligence. But speaking to the leaders in the field, to the professionals, creating that bridge, working closely with them, because in my experience, it's important to have a constant dialogue about not just what could be done, but to triage this towards the direction of travel that's important for progressing our science in the direction of impact on patient outcomes. I've had successful collaborations with colleagues in mathematics and statistics and computer engineering, and I always value the opportunity to talk to people who dream about this the way we dream about cardiac MR. I think there's a lot to be said to building these bridges in addition to DIY.
And lastly, something that I wanted to sort of get into from the point of view of the Early Career Committee is each of you, I'll start with you, Sasha, how your careers have changed from when you first started and you were an early days physicist and you were at the magnet side and you were doing this, that and the other, and maybe some pulse sequence programming, etc. But I've seen your career evolve just in the time you've been in Glasgow to something you've changed much more to something that's to do with education and things. And I just wondered if you could give an outline of how careers change over a career, effectively.
Just be prepared for the change. The change is the only constant factor, in anything that we do. And it's important that you notice the change in the environment, the change in your own personal circumstances, change in questions that are posed, questions that you come up with yourself. But if you have at least one question at any given time, that's, again, I'm going back to this insomniac theme, that's keeping you awake, that's the best way to manage your career and your work, to be curious, to be unwilling to leave your lab, even if if you're feeling very tired because you can't wait to get that next set of results. You want to see whether A is causing B, whether B influences C, whether you can prove it, whether you can find a way of solving a problem. And then if you do that, whatever environment changes, whatever life throws at you, you will be able to progress. So value and nurture your curiosity.
Yes, I think I totally agree. Embracing change, that's key, and change is the only constant in MRI, so that's also something which is very, very nice. There is always something new coming down the pike. But what I'm kind of, what do we get promoted to the lowest level of incompetence or something, right? And if you progress in an academic career, my first love was really pulse programming, and the older you get, you kind of turn into an administrator. You have to wrestle hospital administration, you have to get those grants, you have to hire people, and so you kind of gravitate away from what you really like to do. And I find this is unfortunate, but there is no other way of dealing with this. If you want to, if you're passionate about the field, if you want to make it progress, then of course you have to get to a higher cruising altitude in terms of the organizational structure you're embedded in, and of course then you can no longer, turn on the computer and program. Maybe some of us still do, who are fortunate enough, but unfortunately I'm no longer able to do that.
I agree with you. This is really interesting. Someone of your brain images should scan our brains to see what happens with the programming part of our brain. I went through a phase where when I enjoyed programming, I was programming most of the time. Most of my awake hours were spent programming. Then I moved to a phase of being able to debug and enjoying debugging other people's code but not writing my own. And now I think I don't know what comes next, whether I have second wind and embrace new programming environments and languages. But I think that's a very interesting cognitive pathway, that happens to all of us.
So, in that respect, are you anxious that you're losing some of your skills that you used to have, and that you no longer can perceive what's important? Do you think the administrative things are getting in the way, that you can no longer see the wood for the trees, as the phrase goes in English?
No, I guess it's just a different type of gratification, right? If you are more on an administrative level and you can make things happen for students and you see them succeed, for instance, that's a tremendous gratification. That's probably goes beyond, the compiler which doesn't crash. I think I just miss this because I love to do this, but on the other hand, I became richer in other areas again. I take pride in if my students are successful, and that's just another area you move into. On the other hand, again, administration in a hospital setting is not always easy to wrestle, as you all know.
I do see, though, having been to this meeting over many years, that we have lost people along the way to administration that were initially very passionate about the field, and now they no longer come to this meeting, partly because they've gone up that ladder, and they have lost the clinical contact. And it does seem a shame, I think, that radiologists, as myself, I'm still involved day in, day out with imaging, but I do see that some of the really bright minds that are not clinically tied, their careers do change in a way that we do lose them. And that is something not yourself, but I can think of many people that made contributions to this meeting, that hosted this meeting, and then went up the tree, and you just never see them again.
Yeah, I think this is inevitable, and that's why it's even the more important that we have programs where we can make sure, that young people are coming into the society, like all these initiatives, like this one, for instance, where young people are involved in crafting parts of the meeting, and where we make it attractive for them, perhaps with the fees, etc., to attend, and to do our utmost that we can rejuvenate the field of attendees of this society.
So we have started a webinar series, because this meeting used to be very much a club. It was called a club, and it was a club. But we are broadening out to have something that's not just the meeting, not just the annual meeting once a year. Are there any other things you think we should be doing to reach out and broaden what this society does?
I think we should embrace the technology that was made a necessary means of communication during the COVID years. We should get the best out of this and use it to promote online meetings in addition to this one. I mean, I don't think there is a competition or exclusivity between online only and in person only. I think we should use both. We learned how to use online tools. We should try to connect regularly through webinars, but also more informal meetings, not just in the presentation listening mode, but in terms of discussion that is sadly missing even in setups such as this one. We don't have enough time for discussions, for questions and answers. I think we should use technology to replace that in some way.
Well, I think if you look at other societies, there are these ISMRM workshops, right? And you can submit a program to the ISMRM, and then you can hold a workshop. And I think there are many workshops if you are on the mailing list of the ISMRM. And we could do something very similar. you know, once a year or every other year to have a workshop that is dedicated to, I don't know, angiography in the legs or high field or low field or what have you. Things that are dear to our heart, things that are emerging, things that are linked to the SMRA, and then use this vehicle, these ISMRM workshops, to get this done.
Sorry, I keep getting this wrong. We've been given quite a bit of time to have this fireside chat. I think we're partly a buffer for the notorious SMRA overrun. I'm wondering whether the early career committee people here, where have they gone? They've disappeared. Did they have a burning question that they wanted to add to the fireside chat? No burning questions from the floor. Do you have any questions for me as a clinician, as a radiologist?
What's your staying power, John?
What
What is the secret of your continual involvement with?
Why?
We're talking about people who disappeared. We're talking about people who hadn't disappeared.
Okay, so I've not disappeared. I think it's just that I'm inquisitive, as Matthias said the other day to me, that I'm just really interested in everything. And I'm interested, I see myself as a cardiovascular radiologist, in that, you know, I keep telling people that when my day-to-day job, that I will only report bits of the body that blood vessels go to. You know, I'm not interested in things that there's no blood vessels in. So I'm quite happy to sit in these meetings and look at the brain and look at the abdomen and look at the legs and look at the heart, because I actually do report all these things day in, day out, and I'm always coming across things I don't understand, and I want to know, you know, how I can do better in my day-to-day job, I suppose. I think that's my secret. Plus, you know, it's been a great meeting over the years, and it goes to different places, and it broadens my horizons wherever I go. You know, it opens up different parts of the world. I've never been to Japan before. I might not be able to come again, but I've made sure that while I'm here, I'm going to take some time to go and see the rest of it. That's one of the things that I've loved about this meeting over the years. I'd have never have gone to Madison, Wisconsin, if it hadn't been for this meeting. I'd have never have gone to East Lansing. You know, there's these places that you just wouldn't think of going otherwise. So I think that's one of the things that's kept me coming to this meeting particularly. But coming to all meetings, it's just my innate curiosity, I think. I think you do have a question for us.
May I have a question? I think it will be very beneficial to me and other students, young investigators. So if you tell now, what do you wish you would have known when going back to the starting point of a career? What's the thing you wish you would have known?
Actually, I would turn that around. Looking back, and of course everything is 20/20 hindsight, right? So we have to acknowledge that as well. But I think I was naive enough not to know, and this was very, very helpful. I would never have embarked, I think, on an academic career had I known how difficult it is with the grant writing, etc., etc. So I just did it because it was fun, because it was interesting, because I was passionate, but other than that, I was totally blind, and this was very, very helpful.
I think something that I wish I'd known when I was younger from an academic perspective is that I always got the impression that everybody else was doing things that were much more advanced than me, and I could never catch up. And that if I started something now that was going to take 3 to 5 years to come to fruition, it wasn't worth it because all these other people would have done it by then anyway. And looking back, that was just nonsense. And I wish I'd started stuff that was going to take maybe even 10 years to get done, because a lot of these things are not being done by other people, and you do catch up, and things change so much that, you know, you don't have to have a project that was only going to last for 6 months or a year. That something that lasts 3 or 5 years, you're still going to have value in that. And I think I was put off by that in the past.
There are many things that I didn't know, but I don't think that there is one key item of knowledge that I missed that would have changed my decisions or my trajectory. One thing that I definitely didn't know, and I liked Pang over there used a nice description. He's not listening to me now. Pang, hello? I'm just citing your description of how complex cardiac MRI protocols are. You mentioned that you have to have a full football team there. I didn't realize exactly how complex and multidisciplinary our data acquisition was. And, you know, I think, again, it's a good thing that I didn't know, because I would have chosen something more solitary as a pursuit. But, you know, that knowledge of how many man-hours go into generating a single slice of daikon that we have is something that we need to keep reminding ourselves of.
Thank you for the answers. I think we should just be relatively naive and be brave and embrace what our passion is and just do it. Yeah, thanks.
And we've got an elder statesman asking a question. That's not right.
Well, I'd like to kind of twist the last question around a little bit differently. And many of us have dealt with students and postdocs and fellows over the years. And I think that something to get across to them is that you as the advisor don't know a lot. That is to say that the research project you're working on, if it's state of the art, really doesn't have the answer yet. So you don't do a project and expect to see it in a book somewhere, but rather you're treading on the unknown, and to kind of realize, have the student realize that he or she's being thrown into the deep end along with you to try to figure this out, I think is something to really get across. And along with what you just said, Giles, along with this is the notion that, gosh, work that you're doing in your lab, when you go into meetings like this and see others, you realize that you presumably are working at the state of the art along with everybody else trying to advance things. So this is what research is and why we do it and enjoy it.
One converse thing from that was, I mean, during this conference, Manuela has often jumped up and said, oh, I did that 10 years ago. And that's another thing I would say to people, that, when you do start a project, do make sure you look back at what's been done before. Maybe not just even in MRI, but what's been done before with other modalities, and even looking back at stuff that's kind of pre-internet. Our literature searches tend to go back as far as Google, but maybe we need to go actually a bit further back than that sometimes to see what people did many, many years ago. So, for example, renal sympathectomy, that's something that was done in the 1940s, but that was then kind of forgotten about. And is now making a bit of a comeback again. It made a comeback, then it went away briefly, but it's now coming back again, renal sympathectomy for hypertension. But some of these things go back way, back into the 1900s. So it's worth looking back at what people did many, many years ago. I think we may be running out of time, but I don't really have a good clock. I've got my phone here, but I'm not sure whether we're at the time that we should be handing over to. I think we should be handing over to our incoming president and actually finish even before time. So thanks to Matthias and Sasha for being game enough to sit up here.